right, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me back. Let's see how this one goes. It's gonna be a lot less technical, but it's gonna be way nerdier. First things first, I'm still the same person. My name is Manuel Grabowski. I'm a web ops engineer, a core developer, and many more things at mymuesli. I tweet at @manu_faktur. You can email me and check out my blog at those addresses. Should they be too naughty for you? Fear not. You can also use those and still reach me. Now, real quickly, I'm gonna shamelessly plug my latest project, Annoying Technology. It's a fun little blog I've set up together with a friend where we document daily struggle with how broken everything around us is these days. So this is an example from a dialogue inside Google Cloud Platform. Does anyone see it already? I'm gonna zoom in. And now there it is. Oops, sorry, one too quick. I mean, between 0 and what? Between 0 and empty string? That's not how numbers work, Google. So if you want to see more of those funny little things, you can check it out at annoying.technology. It's horrible, but all right, moving on. Now, what do I want to talk about today? First, I'll do a little striptease. Don't worry, not literally. I'll just show you what kinds of data I'm tracking about myself. And towards the end of that, I'll focus on my health and fitness data, which will then bring us to a general overview of health and fitness tracking. After that, I've got one little thing I don't want to spoil yet, and in the end, I hope that will lead us into a fruitful discussion, because I think it's a topic really worth talking about together. All right, let's get into it. Now, what I am tracking about myself is actually not the best way to phrase it, because I am tracking a lot of stuff, but not everything I'm going to show you is something I'm tracking really myself. But we will come back to that point later. So this is just a short list of things to come, so you can prepare yourself. I will not always go into detail of how I track something, because we only have a finite amount of time. But I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have about that later. So what things do I track? I track music, light, movies, TV shows, running, reading, money, my face, games, sleep. So music is actually songs and concerts, and gaming happens on PC and consoles, and don't forget about mobile gaming. For movies, I track ratings and playtimes. For reading, it's books and comics. It's a lot of things. I also tracked calories for a while. I'm still tracking my weight. Obviously, I'm also tracking sex. And last but not least, I'm also tracking my location. So first things first, music. And music makes sense as the first one, because basically this set me on this path of obsessing over my data. More than 15 years ago, I started using a service called Audio Scrobbler. These days, they are called Last.fm. Does anyone know it? Hands up. Awesome. I like you guys. Very good. So they have this little program for your computer that lets you scrobble what songs you're listening to. And that just means you provide the information to their database. And as a result, you get cool statistics on their homepage, and you can see what music your friends are listening to. So it was a very early Web 2.0 experience. And it became fairly popular back in the days. So for a while, new music players, and I'm talking about software like Winamp here, because that was before music streaming became popular. So new music player software had to face the question, but does it scrobble? Because if it doesn't scrobble, it doesn't count, right? So just to give you a quick idea what kind of statistics that gives me. This is just how many songs I've listened to on average. It's from 2016, and I don't remember what happened in April, but in September and October I was on vacation in, what's so funny? I was on vacation in Iceland, in the Netherlands, and in Portugal, so I had a lot of time to listen to music. Also in that year, I discovered the live album of Daft Punk 9 years after it came out. I was a little late on that, but I could not stop listening to it. And as you can see here, I don't know if you can actually read it, I've listened to it more than 100 times that year alone. And I've played almost 1,600 unique tracks from 467 different albums and 259 different artists that year. Now, that's actually not a lot. I beat every single of those 3 numbers this year in July alone. And that's for a reason, because at the start of this year, I looked at the data and I decided I'm not listening to enough music. So I use the data to change something in my life for the better, because music is pretty awesome. It brings joy to your life. Apparently, especially on Wednesdays between 5 and 6 p.m. Next, movies and TV shows. Now, this is data from 2018. It's just TV shows, and I don't know if you can see it very well, but the numbers are pretty big. So I watch a lot of TV shows. More than 5 episodes per day on average. I know, it's a lot. And below that you can see it by group by week, by month, by day of the week, and by time of day. Now, let's look at May here. It's a lot. What happened there? Well, I checked, and I watched the entirety of Seinfeld and The Office with a friend, and it was really awesome. You can also see here, at the time of day, there almost is no break. So even very late and very early, I watch TV. And we're gonna come back to that. Movies, also from 2018, it's also a lot. It's not my best year, because in 2011, I managed to watch 249 movies. I cheated a little bit, because I watched a lot of short films that year, but an interesting difference is here, the break in the time of day, right? It's larger, we can zoom in. The TV shows are above and the movies are below. And you have to know that the time when it's recorded is when I finish watching it. So the movies that are here, I probably started before midnight, because they are about 2 hours long. And the peak over here is movies I started watching around prime time. So this difference is easily explained, because we've all been there, right? When it's late at night, you're like, no, it's too late. I can't watch a movie now. But I'll just watch one episode really quick, right? And in the morning, there is no time for a full movie, but I can watch an episode on my way to work easily. Another really fascinating data point is where the TV shows I'm watching are coming from. I mean, check out how gigantic Netflix and Amazon studios are compared to everything else. And I don't even have a subscription to either of those services. So that just goes to show you how much content they produce. All that data is collected on one of the greatest sites on the internet. It's called Tracked TV, and it's very similar to Last.fm. They make it incredibly easy to track all your watching automatically. The screenshots I've shown you, they are from their Year in Review feature. And before they added that feature, I just used their API to generate my own version of that. It was a really ugly PHP script and created terminal output, but it made me happy. And the thing is, to this day, they have a terrific API, and they have a great community, and the community builds cool things with the data. And some of the coolest things get integrated officially, just like this Year in Review feature. So open data really is the best data, right? Now, really quick, reading. For reading, I'm using Goodreads to track both books and comics. Sadly, Goodreads is owned by Amazon, so it's not really good, but due to their size, no competitor has a chance to gain traction. Well, I usually read every night before I go to sleep, and every day in the morning I enter my progress. And as you can see, I've already read more than 3 times as many books as I planned to this year. And I think that's with comics, but even not counting comics, I'd still be at double that number. Also, really quick, because this one is super complicated and annoying. Tracking games, and I'm interested in when and how long I play them. And tracking games mostly sucks. Because if you're on PC, Steam does it for you, but you don't play everything on Steam. So instead I'm using a productivity app that you'd normally use for time tracking as a freelancer. And that program tells me how long each program on my computer has been running. And on consoles, it's even worse, because they hate you and they want to keep all the data for you. For themselves, I'm sorry, not for you. All your data for themselves. So to my knowledge, actually Sony does not offer any way to get playtimes. Just as an example. But for Nintendo Switch, I found an interesting workaround. Because what they have is a parental control feature. So as a parent, you can pair a companion app from your smartphone and then see how much your kids are playing. So thanks to Nintendo, I'm kind of my own parent now. Now, luckily, many games track detailed progress themselves. And that's why I can tell you how much time I spent playing this amazing game instead of preparing a better talk for you. The game is called Celeste. It's probably the best platformer of the decade, so I'm absolutely not sorry. And I was asked if I'd want to fill today's spot exactly 31 days ago. In that time, I've completed the entire game. Took me 55.5 hours, so that means I could have spent 1 hour and 47 minutes per day on this talk in peace and quiet, instead of stressing about it the entire last week. Okay, now moving on to location. For location, I've prepared a little special for let's say, for regular customers of this fine establishment. If you were here last time, you will remember that Marcus told us about map services. And I've prepared a little demo using OpenStreetMap and Leaflet.js, a JavaScript map library. Now, I will have to find my mouse cursor really quick, I'm sorry. And I'm not connected to the internet. I'm even more sorry about that. But no problem, because I'm prepared for that. And I have a fallback solution. Sadly, it's not interactive. But basically what you see here is a heat map representing all the location of all the pictures I've ever taken with my smartphone. Right? Because you have GPS data on your photos. And you can see the big hotspot over here. If you zoom into that, it would split into two hotspots. One would be Munich, one would be Passau. Because I used to live and study in Munich, and now I live and study, work. Well, we never stop learning, right? So in Passau. I was on vacation in Iceland. I have no idea what happened here. I don't know. Maybe I was swimming. And I often visit friends in Berlin. I go to conferences in Hamburg regularly. So it's a lot you can tell from just a few pictures, right? And I could actually combine that with the timestamps of the photos, and then I would get a pretty good idea of where I was when. So it's almost scary how much you can tell from just your photo library. And I wanted to show this particular example because basically all of you collect the same data, right? You all take photos with your smartphones. So I'm tracking my location more professionally than that, of course, right? But we all carry 24/7 GPS devices in our pockets these days, so that isn't that interesting. I want to show you something else, though, because not a lot of people know about that. And I think Android and Google users are more aware of it because they can just go to the Google website and see their entire location history. But iOS has something similar. It's just not used to sell your soul to advertisers. So you go from your preferences, you go into privacy, then you go into location services, and then you go into system services. And we're not done yet. From system services, you go into significant locations. And now there would be another submenu. I've skipped that one because it's just a list of those significant locations. And I've selected Passau. And that's what that looks like. Let's zoom in a bit. And that's pretty good. And that's actually just data starting from August, because I had to wipe my phone in August. And whenever you stay in a place for a while or you revisit a location, iOS does store that location. And the information is used to give you Siri suggestions and things like that. Now, I'm not saying this is bad, right? Just so you know, the data is there. But of course, there is no easy or official way to export it, because remember, we're still talking about Apple. All right, money. Well, that's easy, right? Germans don't talk about money, so next slide. No, I'm just kidding. With what I mean with money is I track and categorize every single cent that goes in and out of my pocket and bank accounts, down to the cent. And yes, it's fucking annoying. But on the other hand, sometimes it even saves me money, because sometimes I'm like, do I really want that ice cream? It costs €2. But I would have to get out my phone and categorize it. I don't think I'm gonna need that ice cream after all. And it's pretty awesome to be able to see where my money goes. So this graph shows spending in one category of 2018. The average per month is about $55. What's the category? No one? What? Food? Well, kind of. Who was it? You see how well my colleagues know me. It's sweets. Of course, it's sweets. I'm a very sweet person, and I will die very young. All right, so from sugary treats, moving on to counting calories. And let me tell you, if you think tracking money is annoying, try counting calories sometime. I promise you will lose weight just from the calories you burn while hating yourself for counting calories. I've actually stopped doing it after I lost weight. And it's not just the counting itself that's annoying, but you also become very annoying to the people in your life. Because you'll always check the calories of things, always. You'll be in the supermarket and you'll be looking at the ingredients of Mars bars, right? As if you had to check the ingredients of Mars bars to find out that you should not buy Mars bars. And then you'll be, shocked at the calorie count, and you'll ruin them for everyone else as well. So please have some Mars bars. Tracking calories. As I said, tracking calories really is not fun. I won't go into details. If you want to do it, the most important thing is a good food database where you can track things by simply scanning their barcode. Now, wait, I've mentioned losing weight already, but I've started tracking my weight a long time before I started losing weight. These days, a scale connected to Wi-Fi isn't really a big deal anymore. Today, people are still irritated that my electric toothbrush has Bluetooth, but a Wi-Fi scale is kind of normal. But I've had this scale since early 2010. Remember, that was when the iPhone 3GS was the current model. So every day I step on the scale and it transfers some of my vitals to the cloud, and it's pretty easy. Before I show you my actual weight data, I'll have to introduce the next category, my face. In March of 2011, I started taking a selfie every evening, and I've kept doing it ever since. I usually do it at 7:30 p.m. or at the first opportunity afterwards if I'm at the movies, an appointment on a date or something like that. And it has been exactly 3,127 days since I started doing it, and I have exactly 3,060 photos because even I forget sometimes. Now, I enjoy collecting data myself, but I'm not necessarily a big fan of corporations or the government doing it. And if you remember, back in 2011, Germany did a full census. So when the census taker came to my door, I greeted him like this. And that selfie is from the evening before when I tried out my costume. Now, I let you see almost all of those 3,060 selfies very quickly. And to the right, you can see the graph come to life. The line at the top is my weight. The line at the bottom is the body fat, and both is in kilograms. Now, as you will see really quickly, I lost a lot of weight when I started running in 2014. Wow, down it goes. Now, even at that speed, it does take a little while to show the whole thing. So I'm going to use that time and high five my colleagues who lost a lot of weight. You were already thin, I'm sorry. No, both these guys lost almost or more than 20 kilograms recently as well. So just so you could see more of that little video. Now, moving on, sleep. Sleep is the most important thing I'm going to talk about tonight, because at least 80% of you are not sleeping enough. You all need to read this book, because it will change and it will save your life, believe me. If you regularly sleep less than 7 to 8 hours, you are 200% more likely to have a heart attack or a stroke. You are more at risk for cancer and for Alzheimer's. You're more easily depressed, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Public service announcement over. Now, I didn't track my own sleep when I heard about the book, but I thought about how I might be able to get some data about my sleep. Obviously, my smart home is tracking everything it possibly can. So, for example, when are my lights on or off? And that's what that looks like. So, blue is off, red is on. And that's actually pretty good data to get an approximation of when I sleep, right? It's just the longest stretch of time each day when my lights are off during nighttime. I won't go into the exact details, it's just a bunch of really bad database queries. Let's just say I did not like the results. Afterwards, I used an Apple Watch for sleep tracking. It was much more accurate. And tracking it more closely, it really helped me to take drastic measures to improve my sleeping habits. All right, so with sleep and weight, we've already ventured well into the field of health, right? Now, let's focus on the fitness part a bit. I run a lot. I run so much that I specifically mentioned it in my Twitter description. And I've been running regularly for about 5.5 years. That's about 2,000 days, so 1,500 runs is quite a lot. And if I keep running at the same volume, it will take me about 10 more years for a full equator crossing. In those past 5 years, I've run in 11 different countries. My longest streak was to run every single day for a total of 444 days in a row. And right now I'm on day 312 of a new streak. Let's see how this one goes. Now, of course, for all my runs I'm tracking tons of data. Obviously the GPS route, and that allows me to create cool visualizations like that. This is a heat map of all my running around Passau in 2019. And you can see I'm not running that many different routes compared to last year, where I ran on more different roads. And a fun thing in this graph, I hope you can see it on this display. Here it gets thinner, right? Because I always run out of town and then I run back into town, but I don't always run the same distance. And only a few times do I run out really far. So that's why this gets thinner. Back in 2016, you can see I ran on even more different roads. And the concentration on my standard routes isn't as prominent. Now I'm going to show you a little more detailed what and how I'm tracking about my running. And I'm using a really good program for that, which I will switch to. Sorry. Once, twice. Now, here we go. Okay, I'm going to turn around so I can see. Now, this is the list of activities, and I'm going to zoom in a bit because I think otherwise you can't see. That's better, right? Okay, now this is one activity. You have every basic info there, for example, pace. If you don't know pace, pace is basically the same thing as speed. It's just a different representation of the same value that's more useful for running. All right. Now you have all the standard data points. Duration, distance, pace, altitude differences, average heart rate, burned calories. The route, obviously here, then the weather, the date, time of day, all that is there. And all that you get for free just by wearing a GPS watch. You don't have to do anything on your own. But I add more details. Now, what do I add? I'm going to zoom out a bit. So one thing I do also track is the equipment I use, right? Because I have different pairs of shoes. You can see what I used on this run is my headphones, it's the GPS watch, and those shoes. It wasn't that cold, so I didn't use the gloves. Now, I also make use of the tagging system. Oop. Wait a minute. This is really weird. I see half of the screen on this screen, sorry. Annoying technology. It's really annoying. All right, but you can see here there are tags. So for every run, for every activity, I'm not only running, I add, if I did it with someone, then their name is going in there. Or if I ran alone, that's going there. Have I listened to a podcast or music or nothing, all that kind of stuff is tracked there. And I can tell you, for example, Sebastian and I have been on 30 runs together. We've been playing squash 18 times together. I can also tell you, and now I'm going to zoom out completely, right? Where is it? Right. I can also tell you, that's the equipment list, that I've been using the same pair of headphones for my running for almost 4 years. That's like something like 11,000 kilometers, I think. So I paid about 0.7 cents per kilometer of usage for those headphones. I think that's amazing value for headphones. All right, so the program really quickly gives me an astonishing amount of analysis. I won't go into all that. It's just bonkers what it does. But we don't have time for it, I'm sorry. I want to show you some more things I can do with the data of my running. Those are 2 recent runs I did. I hope you can see, it's a little pixely, right? But you can read it, I hope. They are almost exactly the same. It's the same route. I stopped 100 meters earlier on one of them, and I was a little bit slow on one of them, but the key difference is the average heart rate. So it's 146 over here and 163 over here. That's a 17 beats per minute difference, and that's a significant difference. But everything else is basically the same. The weather, a little different, but not significant. So who can tell me what was different? Who was first?
You finished
Very good. Awesome. Exactly. So in October, with the low heart rate, I was not sick. In September, I was sick. But the important thing is, sorry, where's the mouse? Need my mouse. Don't find my mouse. Does anyone else see my mouse? Well, I'm gonna manage. The important thing is I did not know yet that I was sick. So after the run in September, I looked at the data and I was like, oh no. And yeah, in the evening I already had a fever. Because before I noticed any symptoms, my body was already fighting against the infection, so my heart rate was higher. So let's look at another difference, exactly. So here, similar situation, the difference isn't as big, it's just 7 beats per minute this time. I can usually tell from 5 beats per minute differences if I'm sick or not. But in that case, I wasn't sick. And I wasn't worried about it because I knew exactly why the heart rate was higher than normal on that day. And I won't make you guess this time, it's pretty easy. I was frustrated by an internal conflict at work. And well, to put it mildly. Now, actually, I was so frustrated that I could not get it out of my head during the run. So, during the past few years, this happened often enough that I've learned that being emotionally agitated also increases your heart rate, right? And that's why I take notes for the runs, because when I come across that data in, I don't know, a few years for my next talk, then I will wonder why the heart rate was higher. I can just check the notes and see, all right, I was super annoyed during the whole run. But I don't want to end this chapter on a downer. I got a few fun facts. Now, my last run with Sebastian was exactly 375 days ago. Sebastian says he's doing sports alone as well, but I have no reason to believe him because he doesn't track it. And if it doesn't scrobble, it doesn't count, right? Now, interesting enough, when I start really early, when I start between 5 a.m. and 6 a.m., I always run the furthest. I don't know why. And each degree Celsius in temperature difference outside costs about 3 seconds per kilometer. Now, that doesn't scale perfectly. In minus degrees, it's different. When it's very hot, it's also different. But basically, that's about it. And I told you, I'm tracking what I'm listening to. So 60% of my runs are podcasts, 30% I'm listening to music, and the rest is about half audiobooks or not listening to anything. All right, hands up. Who thinks I'm the fastest when I'm running with podcasts? When I'm running with music? When I'm listening to audiobooks? When I'm not listening to anything? All right, majority wins, music, easily, you're hyped up. I'm the slowest when I'm not listening to anything, so I should do a lot more running not listening to anything and actually calm down during the run. Obviously, when I'm doing a race, I don't listen to just any music. No, I put together a playlist with songs where I performed exceptionally well during training. Because of course, I know when which song was playing during the run, right? All right, finally, enough about myself. This is one of the first GPS-enabled running watches. It's the Garmin Forerunner 301 from 2003. That's 4 years before the original iPhone came out. And the original iPhone didn't even have proper GPS, can you believe it? And during that early time, you only had a GPS-enabled fitness device if you were really into it, because they were expensive and they were clunky. Now, as I said, this is from 2003, the first Fitbit, which I would say is one of the earlier devices of a new era of those things. First Fitbit became popular around 2010. It had no GPS. The first Fitbit with GPS came out in 2015. And of course, by then, smartphones and their integrated GPS had already changed the landscape, right? Because now you didn't need a device for that, but there is an app for that. Today, smartphones are already old tech when it comes to fitness and health. In 2018, smartwatch sales grew more than 50%. And as the health and fitness market keeps booming, the devices become more powerful and sophisticated with remarkable pace. Now let's just take the Apple Watch as an example. So the first version in 2015, it didn't even have GPS. The next version, 2016, GPS is included, but you still need your phone for mobile internet. 2017, you can now use LTE on the watch itself. 2018, they add an electrical heart sensor and you can perform an EKG from your watch. I think this year they added a compass, but what's almost more amazing is that the watch has more single-core computing power than the average smartphone. It's crazy. So these days, because of all that, being able to track your fitness activities has become ubiquitous, and more people track their heart rate 24/7 using a fitness tracker. And at the same time as the necessary advancements in the hardware sector have been happening, software services in the realm of fitness and health embraced the changing landscape of the internet. Because these days it's all about sharing, connecting, and social networks, right? I've shown you my amazing little program, but that's not what the average person wants. The average person wants to share their activity and post a cool picture of the run on Instagram. And people do really cool pictures with their GPS tracks as well. It's pretty amazing what people can do. You should definitely Google that because there is so many more. Can you read that one? It says, "Marry me, Emily." It's really heartwarming that there is even romantic ones. All those screenshots I've just shown you were taken from Strava. Now, Strava is one of the most successful fitness tracking services. They add 1 million new users every month. There is more than 1 billion of activities on the site. It's basically a social network for athletes. You share your activities, you see your friends' activities, and you comment, you praise. There is competitive features, leaderboards, stuff like that. And I want to show you one pretty cool thing they are doing with all their data. That's the Strava global heatmap. So it's basically like the blue-colored maps I've shown you, just with a little bit more data. I think I'm going to just skip the demo because obviously I'm not connected to the internet and that won't work, but I have a fallback as well. That's what it looks like. I can't zoom in now. Maybe at the end of the talk we'll take a minute to get me online, and then I'm going to show you Passau because it's pretty cool to see. Now for the next slide, I've just zoomed into a specific part of that heat map. Who can tell me what that is? Close, right? It's zoomed out here in the middle, the bright spot in the middle, that's it. And exactly, it's a military base in Afghanistan. Actually, it is a secret military base in Afghanistan. Or at least it was a secret military base in Afghanistan, because the soldiers there also use their fitness devices, and you have to specifically opt out to not share all your data publicly. So the release of this heat map created quite some headlines, and you probably can't read it, but the screenshot here in this article, that's the city center of Pyongyang in North Korea. So this also very good. You can see popular running and cycling rounds around the GCHQ. That's the British intelligence agency you probably all remember best from the Snowden leaks. So what's the problem here? Because data on the heat map is aggregated, right? But as I said, Strava is a social network, so they want to make it really easy for you to connect to people and find people, because then you won't leave the service. You might become a premium user. And this is the CIA headquarters in Langley. So it's very easy to find out who is actually doing those activities around there, and then you can check the time of day. You can check the start and finish locations, and you might be able to figure out who is doing a run on their lunch break and works there. Now, I guess those cases won't affect anyone here personally, but that's not the only way in which this data can be abused. So this is what a typical activity looks like on Strava. And there is 3 things to note. The start and the finish are clearly visible, right? It's specifically marked as a commute, so it's not very hard to find out the home and the work location. And Strava, of course, also allows you to track your equipment, just like I showed you with my program. So the exact model of the bike he was using is listed there as well. And of course, people have already used that information to target possible victims and specifically steal expensive bikes. So it's not all bad. Strava knows where people are actually riding their bikes, and that's great information, because it's not always where city planners think that people actually ride their bikes. So You can use that data to reshape infrastructure and improve the usefulness and the safety for everyone. It's called Strava Metro, and they've turned that into a business of its own, and that's basically a win-win situation, because Strava has a revenue stream where they are not really needing you as a user to pay for their service, and they still get money. And the cities can use the know-how and the wealth of data that has accumulated at the tech company. But I want to take a step back from the big data aspect and go back to the more personal level. So this is a screenshot from a promotional video at the latest Apple event. It's just one example, because these devices, be it from Apple or their competitors, they are clearly marketed at being able to improve your life, and not just by making you fitter. Also by watching out for you. The Apple Watch fall detection is one example, right? You fall down and you don't move, then it calls emergency services for you. Or the EKG feature I've mentioned. When your heart rate becomes irregular, it gets a warning, and supposedly this has already saved lots of lives. In the current generation, I think the Apple Watch also added noise detection. So you get a warning if you're in an environment where you're at danger of hearing damage. And you can expect those features to increase in quality. They will become better, more sophisticated, and quantity. They will figure out anything they can do to support you. But I want to focus on the primary promise for a moment. Let's say helping you become the best version of yourself, or whatever they call it in their marketing. Because it clearly works for many people. And how do they do it? How do they motivate you? And the key here, of course, is gamification. Gamification means fun little challenges. You do them day by day. It doesn't seem too daunting, and then it gets you hooked, right? So you fill the progress bar every day, you collect all the stars every day, you close all the circles every day, whatever you want to call it. And you repeat this day by day to get even greater accomplishments, a full week or a full month, and having that perfect streak. And let me tell you, it works really well. Seeing a month full of filled circles is very satisfying, and it is definitely something to be proud of, no doubt about it. But it's not without its own set of problems, though. Working out is healthier than not working out. But most people should not work out every day, because most people are tired or exhausted or sick on some days. And even if you're healthy and very active, rest days are super important for anyone who's doing sports. And people are calling out Apple and the rest of the industry, and rightly so, because never resting really isn't healthy. And a lot of software in that area is very obviously planned and developed by people who understand way too little about what they are doing. I can give you an example of my own first week with the Apple Watch. I ran about 10 kilometers each day on average during that week. A few longer runs, intense, and a few shorter runs, relaxing. And I need those short runs to regenerate. Now at the end of the week, the Apple Watch told me, hey, great job. You had an average of 900 burned calories per day. And then it said, hey, you can do better. Let's set a minimum goal of 960 this week. And I was, no, that's kind of crazy, because 900 was my average. I didn't even reach 900 on every day of the previous week. So I consciously have days where I don't do that much. So I set it to 630 calories for the next week. And I actually had to go for a short walk on one evening to even reach those 630, even though I was running in the morning. And at the end of that second week, it suggested a new minimum of more than 1,000 calories. And that's crazy. It's dangerous. That's not healthy, that's dangerous. But Apple isn't alone in offering features that can be used for good, but are not perfect. This is a so-called Strava segment. A segment is a specific part of a route for which Strava then creates a leaderboard. So anyone using the site can create a segment. They just select part of a run or activity they did. And after creating the segment, whenever someone runs or cycles across that segment, their time is taken and it's compared in the leaderboard. So that's kind of cool. This is a segment right next to my home. I should improve my time someday, but I'm afraid some cyclists get a bit too competitive. And some people create really stupid segments that end right before a traffic light, or go around a sharp corner on a road where pedestrians are also crossing. And people have actually died from that. And Strava has been sued because people have told them, hey, you've got those dangerous segments, you should remove them, and they didn't do anything. So Strava got sued, and Strava handled that situation super well. But in another example, a cyclist actually killed a pedestrian, and his Strava account was taken as evidence for previous grossly negligent behavior, and he was actually convicted of vehicular manslaughter. Now, no doubt about it, that asshole had it coming, but remember, everything that is collected about you can be used against you. Something to keep in mind. Now, there is a few things worth mentioning that are not specific to health and fitness. You see the same things in every growing market. Because Facebook and Amazon and Apple and Netflix and Google, they dictate our lives in ways that most governments can only dream of. And in this brave new world of surveillance capitalism, everyone tries to copy the patterns that allows them to do so. Now, as I said, this is not specific to health and fitness, but it's absolutely something that shapes that landscape as well. So everyone wants to capture the whole market. Data is increasingly kept in silos. And in my experience here in our region, more people know and use Runtastic than Strava. Runtastic, by the way, has become Adidas Running a month ago. So takeovers and concentration on big players is also something you can expect to keep happening. But I want to point out Runtastic for always having been absolute shit when it comes to giving you access to your own data. They wanted to lock you into their service really, really hard. So just like most other tech companies on the planet, fitness and health companies don't give a shit about your privacy, and they suck at securing your data. They don't even understand what it means to handle that kind of data. I mean, think back to the secret military bases. The default setting is almost make everything public, and they use dark patterns to cheat you into consent because they profit from it. And you know those annoying LinkedIn requests from people that got tricked into letting them email everyone in your address book, right? These kinds of things, you will find them at fitness and health services as well, because they all want to grow and grow and grow. Strava, a few years ago, shut down their APIs without any notice. They restricted access to the new APIs to selected partners. And of course, services that were built using the old APIs is what made Strava so successful in the first place. Strava had become a big enough player so that people had actually built livelihoods around offering services with those APIs. It was a really bad move. It caused a shitstorm because it negatively affected paying users from them as well. And just a few months ago, they cut access for a company to the new APIs as well. No communication about it as well. So what I want to say, when you don't do the tracking yourself, but hand it out to someone else doing it, you have to think about maybe you're doing a deal with the devil, right? But even if you track everything yourself, it's not always sunshine. Sometimes GPS has a bad day. And when that happens, I also have a bad day. You can ask my coworkers, because they can usually tell when something like that happened the moment I walk into the door. Of course, I corrected that when it happened. It only took me 30 minutes of my life to recreate the track on some online service to find out the exact distance that it should have been. I did that during my lunch break. Who knows what I did when I came home that day?
Read a photo.
Yes, correct.
Maybe you were running the same direction to check if we were correct recreating.
I just went on another run. I did the same run again on that day. I ran twice, because even recreating it wasn't good enough for me. I wanted to know exactly how far I was running. Yeah, that's very healthy, right? Okay, remember the cool TV and movie stats I showed you? I am really obsessed with that data. I've watched and rated more than 2,000 movies. I've played more than 20,000 episodes of TV shows. And in the past, I've noticed that sometimes the data changes a little bit. Sometimes it's just a typo in a title that's corrected. That's no big deal. Sometimes, though, the internal identifier for a movie or TV show changes. I don't know exactly why, but it can lead to the service forgetting that I watched it. So after that happened for the first time, I sat down and I wrote a program. It has about 1,000 lines of code. It runs every day, midnight, on one of my servers. It downloads the complete data from that service for me. Then it compares it to the complete data it downloaded the night before, calculates the differences, and sends me an email what changed. So every day in the morning, I look at that email and check if it matches what actually happened the day before. So that's a normal email. I watched Toy Story 4 and I watched South Park, and that's fine. Sometimes there is a minus and not a plus, and that's super, super irregular, and I also have a bad day when that happens. Well, now finally, those are the routes of all my runs from 2019. And you can see that most of them are exactly the same, right? They are very similar. In February, I started using a service that builds a training plan with machine learning. So that way they can tell me the exact best run I should do every day by analyzing data of my previous runs. Now, the thing is, I know a few things about machine learning, I know a few things about GPS, and I wanted to make sure that their algorithms got the best possible data. And one thing GPS isn't that good at is altitude. But even running up a slow hill gets your heart rate up really quick, even if GPS doesn't necessarily notice you're running up. So what did I do? I stopped running up hills. On 95% of my runs, since I started using that service, I just run across the flat part of that closest side road near my home. I run one way until there's a tiny incline, and I turn around, run the other way until there's a tiny incline. Yeah, so it's about 800 meters. Longer runs can get a bit boring. But there's actually a funny aspect to that story, because since I started doing that, I met a lot of my neighbors for the first time since living there. So far, four different neighbors stopped me on a run and asked why a crazy person is running across their window during breakfast all the time, right? So what I want you to get from this is this big question you should always ask yourself. Are you creating the data, or is the data creating you? And again, I don't want to argue that one is right and one is wrong. Sometimes you want one thing, sometimes you want the other, but it's worth keeping the difference in mind. So we're almost done, just the secret finale. All the data is actually tracked by myself. And part of what I hope to achieve with this talk is to encourage all of you to have some fun with your own data. Now, you might say you don't have a lot of data, but that's not a problem. If you don't have data about yourself, who has?
Google.
Yeah, I mean everyone. Everything you do is tracked these days. Seriously, Spotify tracks the brand of your headphones. They track when you change the volume. They track when you resize the application window, right? And thanks to the GDPR, you now have a right to get that data. And in preparing for this talk, I sent GDPR requests to a dozen of companies. For example, Apple, Sony, Nintendo, Twitter, Strava, Garmin, Telegram, Amazon, Instagram, Reddit. And so far, I have only gotten data back from 5 of them. The rest is still in progress. But those 5 I've got alone is 16 gigabytes of data. I can't go into that because that's a whole talk on its own, right? And some of the data actually is pretty garbage. For example, just one example, the Twitter data includes the categories for ads which they place you into. So Twitter apparently thinks I'm interested in Formula 1. And to be honest, I could not think of something more stupid than 20 people sitting in cars, driving around in circles for a few hours. I have no idea how they came up with that. But what I want to finish on, the data is out there. And it's your data. It belongs to you. You should absolutely get it. You should take the power back. Thank you very much.